All right, so welcome everyone to the meeting for today. We're going to be doing it a little bit differently today. We have a special guest, our story coach, Ashley Amprera. She's going to introduce herself and she's going to give us a lesson on writing a book or what you can do to get started. She'll give you more info on what she plans to talk about. But I think just my 2 cents on it is that having a book as someone in the speaking industry has been huge for me. And that's why I invited her on, because I love her content. I love what she's doing. She's written the book. I read it. It's awesome. I have it on my shelf. I'll try to pull it out, but it's called The Key to Happiness. I love the book. And I want her to explain more about what she does as well. What we're going to do after that is we're going to go into shorter versions of people telling their story. Last week, for those who were on the call, I've decided that what we're going to do to try to all improve as speakers is take our stories and make smaller versions of speeches to add on to our stories, or to use our stories to make smaller versions of speeches. And the reason we're going to do that is because I think sometimes, I don't know if you notice that when you're at your clubs, if you're a Toastmaster or wherever you are, people are kind of hesitant to volunteer for a speech. So they don't want to do a speech because they don't know if they can create a 7 or 8 minute speech for next week or for 2 weeks from now. So we're going to do shorter versions of that. And hopefully that will give you the confidence so that you can go out, share your story, and actually expand to bigger speeches down the road. And I'll show you how to expand those as well. All right, so that makes sense. And I picked on some people last week that are going to do it this week. And then we can actually add on to that depending on how much time we have left. So I hope that sounds good for everyone. And that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute everyone, and then I'm going to let Ashley unmute yourself, and the floor is yours, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So to start, do I have any authors aside from Kwesi? Yes. Heidi, Laura, anybody else? Okay. I can just see hands by video, so I apologize. Okay, wonderful. So I just wanted to share just a little bit about kind of like what it is that a book can really do for you as a speaker, and also just even walk you through a little bit, if that's something that you are considering doing, to show you kind of what are those steps to start doing already to get that book done. So first and foremost, I'm a book coach and a story coach. So really everything that I do is around people's stories. I think we all have a story to share, and we're all speakers in here, right? So like you are already doing that. You're already sharing your story. And I actually started doing all of this through speaking. I started public speaking in 2015. I put myself into a public speaking competition. I don't know how that came to be, but it did. And, it was something that really changed my life, because that was the day that I realized how important storytelling is, and also the impact that our stories can have in people's lives. Simply by you getting up at the front of the room, sharing your story, you connect with people, and people ask for more and they want to know more. And so that was kind of like my little starting point. And then it was an opportunity where I just got invited to do more speeches. Kwesi had invited me, other people had, and honestly, no formal training. So like I know a lot of you are in Toastmasters. I haven't personally been in Toastmasters, so I don't have any formal speaker training. It was more of me speaking from the heart and just doing it because I wanted to help people and I wanted to show up for people. So just like that, immediately, like it was just one of those things where I was speaking and doing that, and I said, what else could I do? How can I do something where I could help people on a bigger scale? And that's where the book came about. And as someone who is kind of a little bit introverted, writing was always my outlet. And so I decided, how great would this be? And 2015, I was journaling every single day for a year, and I was kind of inspired. I don't know if anybody has read Anne Frank's book, and basically how her book was just diary entries, and it just was, someone published it and put that into a book. So I had thought, I'm just going to write every single day and that's going to be my book. But then I started to realize once I came to the end of 2015, that there was a lot more that I could share. There's only so much that you can say in a 2-minute speech, a 5-minute speech, 10 or 20 minutes. But imagine if you were able to put everything, all of your wisdom, all of your insights, all of your teaching into something, and someone can take it home with them. It can be in someone's back pocket. It can be in someone's purse. It can be on their night table. Like, imagine that. That is where, the impact comes, and where we get to start to expand that a little bit more. So I just want to highlight some of those reasons why you should really consider writing a book, especially if you're a speaker. I love personally working with entrepreneurs, speakers, because I think it's just something that really can add to what you're doing, to whether or not you consider that you have a brand, but if you're a speaker, you do have some kind of brand. And so one of the major things, like right off the bat, is credibility. And I know that's something that a lot of us, you probably have heard before, that it adds credibility, but it's adding credibility and also helping you stand out. So there might be opportunities where you're the person, you're the speaker, you're the guest speaker, but there's also might be opportunities where you're a panelist and you're with other speakers. And what I've noticed in my own experience is people even introduce you differently when they say, oh, and by the way, they're an author, right? Like, there's already a difference, and people just have respect. As soon as you tell someone, I've written a book, they're like, wait a minute, hold on, you've written a book? Because it's one of those things that we look at and we say, wow, that's probably one of the hardest things. Just like public speaking is very hard, writing a book is not easy either, but it's something that just adds that little extra touch to what you already doing. So credibility is number one, standing out, but then it's also that opportunity for you to, like I said, tell your story. And this is probably my favorite thing, is just the fact that you can reach more people. So physically, if you're giving a speech, you physically need to be there, right? But imagine if you wake up in the morning and while you were sleeping, someone purchased a copy of your book in, a country across the world. Like, how that would be such an incredible feeling for you to experience that. And that's where we start to look at the reach, right? The reach ends up being much larger, because you never know who's finding it on Amazon or wherever you decide to, if you decide to publish it that way. You never know who's going to come across it. You never know who's going to come across your Instagram account and really connect with what you have to say. Maybe it's something that they really were looking for, and you popped up and now they have your book. What an incredible feeling, right? So it's just those little extra steps that we can do to just really reach more people. And ultimately, at the end of the day, our goal is to help more people. There is one thing, like an additional source of income, but it's not that this physically selling this is not where the income is going to come from. I want to touch a little bit more on really where you start to see that, authors are making a lot of money. We'll touch on that. I'll touch on that next, but also another great way for you to start growing your email list. And then this way, it just allows you to, that's what you can control, is your email list. And so whenever, Amazon's not going to be sending you, if you decide to publish on Amazon, they're not going to be sending you a list of everyone who's purchased your book, right? You want to make sure you have an email list and are growing that so you can offer other things in the future. That's more of like when we're thinking big picture. So on that note, just for you to know as well, that the possibilities with this book that you decide to, if you choose to decide that and go that route, are endless. And here's why. So these are just some ideas just to get your head going and some inspiration and some motivation. So with your book, if you're not already a speaker, everyone here is a speaker, right? So that's one thing. You already are probably a step ahead because you already have written speeches, and that can just be placed inside of your book. So you're already a step ahead from a lot of people. But let's say for people who have never done a speech, well, now if I'm invited to go and speak, I can just open up a page in my book, pull it out, and that's my talk. That's my keynote. But now here's where it gets a little even more exciting. Now think of turning this into an online coaching program. Think of this into one-on-one coaching or group coaching, workshops, retreats, seminars. The list goes on and on and on, but this is where you start to really see the impact. For me, I actually did turn my book into an online coaching program. It was just, to be honest, it wasn't something that I planned for, but it's something that happened, and it just aligns so well. But that's where you start to see, and you tap into all these different networks. You start tapping into people who really need that one-on-one support with you. That's where you start to see more of that financial rewards side to it. And you really can start to see that, you know, the speaking engagements, you could do them for free. And then what happens is you just offer your book at the end, and this becomes your business card in exchange, right? Like that's what the exchange ends up being, is this becomes your business card. And so I just wanted to touch on, if this is something that you want to do, I really want to give you some actionable steps that you can use if you want to start to get the ball rolling and put a book together. And these are the steps that I teach all of my clients and go through with all of my clients. So step number one, and it's much like as if you're preparing for a speech, right? You want to know why are you preparing this speech? What's the purpose? Why is this speech important? But in this case, why is this book so important? And not important for you, more so focusing on why is it important for other people? What are they going to receive from it? So I always like to reverse engineer, and just like you're writing a speech, what are those takeaways? So I always like to say, find 3 to 5 key takeaways that people are going to take from your book. Once you have that, you can start to work backwards. And so once you've figured out, okay, you've gone through kind of what your book is about, why it's important, and done all of that work. And the reason that's so important is because when you create this really, I'm sure a lot of you have heard it, but when you create that emotional connection to whatever you're doing, it allows you to really push through those experiences and those moments where you feel like giving up. I don't know if Kwesi, if you had it while you were writing your book, but it gets challenging. You know, I had that moment where I thought that I was just going to quit and not publish my book because I didn't know. I didn't want people. I don't know if you felt that, Kwesi.
I did. I did. And yeah. I had that self-doubt when I was writing my book almost daily. So right? I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that it can really, that fear can paralyze us. But when we are, and this is why it's so important to think not about why is this book important for us, but why is it important for the people that we're writing it for? Because then you step outside of yourself and remind yourself why you're doing it. And then you remember the other people who need it. And that was the experience in the moment that I had when I felt like I was going to give up. I had someone remind me and say, well, why did you want to do this from the get-go? And I said, all right, like I have to keep going, right? And so there are going to be those moments as you write, because especially when we write about our personal experiences, there's triggers, and it's not easy to go through all of that. But the end reward, my goodness, it's such a healing process as you write. It is so healing. I'm sure that Kwesi and Heidi can attest to this as well, that as you go through and you write, things are coming up, but you're at the same time healing yourself as you continue writing this. So get very connected to why it is that you want to write this book for other people. And once you have that, we want to get super clear on who those people are. So who are, you know, a lot of times people say your ideal client, but in this case, we're talking about our ideal readers. So who are they? We want to know, what are their frustrations? What are their worries? What are their fears? Where do they hang out? Where are they online? Who are they? What other authors do they read? What other influencers are they looking up to? Getting so nitty gritty, like career, all of these different things, getting super clear, because then we know exactly how to speak to them and communicate to them inside our book. Because when we try and speak to everybody, we speak to nobody. So we want to find our little like tribe of people. And yes, there'll be people on the outside who will probably still purchase the book and it'll still resonate. But as long as we are clear and we're not trying to speak to everyone, because that's where we get lost and overwhelmed and confused. And so once you have all of this work, and what I really do recommend, I even did this for my own program as I was creating this coaching program for authors. I interviewed authors. Kwesi was one of them. Like I sat and I said, tell me, what was it that you struggled with? What were some of those fears that you had? What were the things that held you back? And you use their language. That's probably the key, is you start to use their language in your actual book, but even in your marketing. And this is something that you can do just business-wise, but thinking about your book, like do this again. You want to do this and you want to write a book that is for them. It's not about you. It's about the other people who are going to read this. So I always like to say, so step one is really like the why and getting, like unpacking all of that stuff. Step number two is your reader. So getting clear on who your reader is. And step number three is your outline. And so this can be challenging, but I want to simplify this. This is what I like to do, is really simplify the process of writing your book. So you can do it, there's many different ways. I personally like to do mind maps just to get all of my ideas down on paper so I can physically see it. If you have, I know people who use sticky notes, if you want to just write all your ideas. If you have a blank wall, put them all on a wall. And this is how you can start to rearrange and organize your ideas and your thoughts. Now, it's the outline and the structure of your outline is going to depend on what it is that you're writing about. Like if you are telling your story, for example, one of my clients, she's sharing her experience, with a separation between her and her husband and the kids. So a timeline of events makes sense a little bit. And so that might make sense for whatever you're writing about, but sometimes it's not necessary. So as an example, I'll just refer back to my book as an example. So the key takeaways was, number one, happiness. So for people to find the happiness within, and also for people to embrace their story. And so I sat and I asked myself, well, how do I get, if that's my end result and that's my end goal for my reader, what's the process for me to take them there? So sometimes that's what you have to ask yourself is, what is that process of taking someone to get to this end result that we want? So for example, the very first step was forgiveness, right? That was my one chapter. And then I took different experiences and I tied them into that one chapter. That's one way in how you can organize your chapters and create your outline. As another example, this is kind of unique. This is my client, Pamela, who just launched her book yesterday. And what I love so much about her book, so it's called The Language of the Soul, Mindfulness from A to Z. So she literally took every single letter of the alphabet and provided 26 ways to be more mindful. So those are just different examples of how you can create the outline of your book. I always say that if you spend more time in your outline and getting it like very detailed, the writing becomes a lot easier because you've already done all the work to figure out what's going to go inside this chapter. And now it's just finessing it and making it a little bit prettier. And then once you've finished your outline and you've got your outline in a place where you feel good about it, the next step is your chapters. Schedule. So this is one thing that blew my mind. We have 168 minutes or 168 hours in a week. What it takes to probably write one chapter as just a first draft, probably maybe I would say max 3 hours. We can carve out 3 hours in a week to get one chapter done. So let's say you have 7 chapters, perfect. 1 chapter a week, just focus on 1 chapter a week. And that's how we simplify and we break it down. And we just focus 1 chapter a week until the book is done. Once it's done, doing a self-edit, and that's where and then you start to work on like the publishing and all that stuff. But I just wanted to focus more so on the writing part and getting that done. And that's really, as much as I can simplify the process. If there's any questions, happy to answer any questions.
I have a question before anyone else gets going, did you do any writing beforehand that kind of gave you some seed material for your book? Like were you writing a blog or diary entries that at least gave you some start for content in your book? Or do you just say, okay, I'm starting with the book?
That's a very good question. So I did, because I was doing public speaking, for me and my speeches, I wrote them out. Like I am just that type of person. That's how I prepare speeches. I physically write everything out. So already that was just content already for me to say, I can put this inside my book. But then you can start to think, and this is where it gets fun. You can start to think of maybe things if you do have a blog, but if you don't, well, are you on social media? Do you post things on Facebook? Do you post things on Instagram or LinkedIn? You can start to take those pieces and also just keep them in a document and add them onto your book as well. That's what I did too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I know that I'm going to informally poll. I know that we have a few authors here. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for all that content. I'm like feverishly taking notes as I'm trying to pay attention. So if you ask me a question, it's because I'm looking down. That's why I wasn't answering right away. Now, informally here, is anyone who hasn't written a book thinking of writing a book, or anyone who has? Actually, let me ask that question first. Who here is thinking of writing a book that's never written one before? Okay.
Amazing.
Now, you gave a lot of steps, Ashley. What's the first, what out of everything, all the rich content you gave, what should they do?
The very first step, I would say, get very clear on what it is that you want to write about. Like that is the biggest part, is just getting very clear on the purpose of it. Like, is it, and think big picture, right? Like, what is it that you want? Don't just think about, oh, I want to write this book. Think about, yes, I want to write this book, but what do I want to do afterwards? It's the big picture plan that personally, even for myself, I didn't even think about that beforehand. I didn't think about all these possibilities. So think about those possibilities as well, because then it makes it a little easier as you write your book.
I see Corinne has her hand up. Corinne, go ahead, unmute yourself, ask your question.
Yes, I have thought about writing a book because I love to read. And I've thought about it and I've thought about it, and that's all I've done. The other day with the COVID excitement, we had these farmers market, and then persons were getting produce that they were not used to. For instance, produce that was produced just for the hotel industry. And one person in one of the groups I'm in, she asked, what do I do with this? And she took a picture. And I told her, she said, oh, Corinne, you should write a book for senior citizens like myself who can't cook.
I love that.
And I actually probably could write a cooking book because I do have a background in catering management. So maybe I could, and I do, and I like to cook. So I have all these ideas, and I've been told to write the book, but I have done nothing. So I need a slap.
Well, and part of that too, like it's a good place to be in if you do have a lot of ideas. Like that's not anything bad. I always say when people come to me and they say they have so many ideas, start with the one that you are probably the most excited, most passionate about, is where I would start.
Thank you.
Okay. Before I move on at all, Ashley, you're in front of your computer. Please say and type in how people can follow up with you. You have a website, you have an Instagram, you have a Facebook group. Put it all in the chat and speak it as you say it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll type it afterwards, but I do have a private Facebook group. So it's called the Author Circle, and it's like there's a bunch of aspiring authors in there, and I do weekly trainings in there. I also do have a guide that you can download. It's a workbook with all these steps as well. So I can type that all there. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, ashleyann.me is my website. I'll put that all there below. If you have any questions, you can feel free to send me a message.
Okay, so can we all say thank you very much to Ashley? It's going to be a very silent one because everybody's probably going to wave, but I truly appreciate you taking the time for sharing all that. And even someone who has written a book, I'm writing down things that I could have done differently in my first book, and also for my next book, I'm going to be using some of your tips. So I truly appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so now we're going to shift gears. And last week, for those who were here, like I said, I asked a few people to create just a short version of a speech using their own stories and using what I call the SIP process, the story investigation process. So basically sharing a story from their life and then telling us or giving us a lesson that can come from it. I gave an example last week, and if they're still okay with it, I'm going to call on the 4 people that I volunteered last week. And I'm just going to go through and give you a little coaching afterwards after you do your story on how you can possibly, tweak a few areas or extend it. So I asked Phyllis, Gilbert, Heidi, and Avis last week to prepare stories, and I think we just lost Avis, so we'll put her last. And everybody, if you're okay with it, I'm going to call on you one at a time to go through your story using the process. The process basically is me. Step 1 is me. What is your story? Second part of the process is we. What is the universal theme? And the final part of the process is you. So it's me, we, you. You. What can you take? What is the lesson for you? What's the takeaway for you? And before we get into it, I'll just give you a quick example that I did last week. It's kind of an extension of what I did last week, and I'll do it very informally. My wife is the gardener of our family. She's the one that goes out there, picks the weeds, plants the seeds, does everything that is needed to improve our the look of our garden and our curb appeal. What she saw today when she went out was grass and then weeds. I don't know if anyone has weeds in their garden, but we have a lot of weeds popping up at various places in our grass. And the weeds are easily visible because they're over the height of the grass. So you see them growing. And so I asked her, I said, honey, do the weeds grow faster than the grass? And she said, yeah, you can see it because the weeds grow almost twice as fast as the grass. They're annoying. I want to get rid of them. It's hurting my back. I got to help her after this. And it kind of got me thinking that a lot of times things in our life that we don't want come a lot quicker. They're more readily visible. They're more readily there than the things that are good in our lives. And we focus on those bad things sometimes. But I wonder what would happen if you didn't spend so much time focusing on the weeds in your life, because at the end of the day, the good grass far outnumbers the weeds that are in your garden. So as you look at your life and the things that aren't the best in your life, that things aren't great, perhaps take some time to notice the green grass around it. So that's just an example of something that you can use from your life that can give a lesson based on a story from your life. So if that makes sense, we're going to go on, and I'm going to start with Phyllis. So Phyllis, we're keeping these under 2 minutes, but we're not having timing lights. I'll just give you a timing afterwards. It's not strict. Are you ready to go with your
I'm ready
story?
to go. I'm ready to go.
I knew you would be. I just thought I'd just throw out that rhetorical question. Okay. I'm going to make sure everybody is muted here. And Phyllis, the floor is yours.
I don't know about the rest of you, but I am having a great deal of trouble when I go to the grocery store wearing these stupid face masks. Now, I'm doing it because everybody else is, but I find that standing in line, I get feeling hot, I can't breathe, and I want to just tear it off of my face. But I'm afraid of what other people will say and what other people will do to me should I do that. So I suffer in silence, and I start to get faint because the carbon dioxide that I am breathing out, I'm breathing it right back in again. It got me thinking, what I'm doing in the grocery store to not be recognized as someone who is stepping outside the lines that have been chosen for us makes me realize that I am personally giving up my freedoms because everybody else expects me to. Have you ever found yourself doing that and then resenting the fact that you've done it? I'm in that place right now. So what I do is I don't go shopping anymore. The cupboard is getting bare. The husband and the dog are beginning to complain that they're getting the same thing night after night. But I personally am afraid to take my mask off in a store because of what other people will say to me or make me feel. Public shaming for me is not something that I want to endure. And then I step back and I think, this is all in my head and obviously in my nose and my mouth. What if I take a different attitude and I think, I am making this sacrifice so that you, as the person standing in front of me and behind me, are safe. And that changes the dynamic. Back to you, Kwesi.
Thank you very much, Phyllis. I will share my comments after, but very good job, very good job. I mute myself during the speeches. That's why it took me a little long to get back to it. Before I get to feedback on that, we're gonna actually go right through and go to our next speaker, who is going to be Heidi. Heidi, are you still on board to do it? I will unmute you. Heidi, are you good?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Hi.
Okay. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to embrace that small self of us where we were children, and there's always somebody that's bigger than us and stronger than us. But down deep inside, there's a sparkle in every one of us, and we need to reach for that sparkle, whether it's a higher God, our higher selves, or just realizing that even though the bullies are out there, there's something good inside each of one of us. I want to share with you my book that I wrote, The Unwanted Twins. It's about all kinds of abuse. And my abuse started at a very young age. But through that, I've learned that there's a sparkle in me and there's a sparkle in you. And I've learned to forgive the people that have hurt me. And because of that, I've been able to reach out and find people like you, like-minded, interested in the same things I am, and find friends out there. And that's what gets you through everything. The higher you, the higher the God, and the higher the friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I'm making notes and hosting. Jeez. Okay. All good. Gilbert, you up? You up for it?
Yeah.
Of course you are.
I can start
Okay.
whenever.
The floor is yours.
Since quarantine, my nearly 2-year-old daughter and I have been taking walks every day. And so I strap her into the stroller and we walk our way down the path behind our house until we get to the pond. She loves the pond. That's where she quacks at the ducks and she talks to the geese. But on one particular day, I got a notification on my cell phone letting me know that I have a meeting, a Zoom meeting in 15 minutes. We didn't even get to the pond yet, but not thinking anything of it, I turned the stroller around and immediately 2 brown eyes looked back at me and said, "Daddy, goose." I said, "Oh, baby, I'm sorry. Today, Daddy has to go to a meeting. We're not going to be able to see the geese today." I said, and that's immediately when she turned into a terrible 2. No, Daddy, goose, Daddy, goose. And arms started to flail and tears started to flow. And I had to stop the stroller and say, "Avery, I'm very sorry. Daddy has to go to a meeting, but I promise you, tomorrow we will come back and we'll see the geese and we'll see the ducks. Tomorrow." And she said, "Tomorrow?" I said, "Yes, baby, tomorrow." Okay. Sometimes in life, there are disappointments. Whether it's you going for a job or going for a promotion, sometimes you don't get it. You'll put an offering on a house and it's not accepted. You'll try to start your own business and for some reason it just doesn't pan out the way that you thought it would. But what you have to remember is that tomorrow will come. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. before I get into it, I remember it was Ed Tate, the world champion of public speaking, who said sometimes the best answers are seated. So he didn't always just give the answers right away. He asked people in the audience, okay, for their input. So we're an open group here. Does anyone have any initial feedback on any of the three before I get into my feedback on the various stories? Bueller?
Kwesi?
Anyone?
I mean,
Clinton.
Kwesi.
Yeah.
Yes,
go
you
ahead.
know, I want to congratulate everyone. When we started this sessions over a month ago, this wasn't the quality. I think everyone has improved. I listened to Gilbert. I remember when Heidi started, and some of you could have been speakers before, but I am just amazed at how we have been able to take the training that we provide to each other, and we all learn and grow from each other, and run with it. And I am sitting here, you guys can't see me, I'm in my jogging clothes. I was out for a run, so I'm all sweaty. That's why.
Let us see you anyways.
Are you kidding me? The screen would broke. But I must say seriously, like I am shaking my head with the quality, and I'm jotting down my notes and just telling you story, the me, we, and you. And fortunately, Kwesi, I was just listening to Lisa Nichols with her me, we, you. Tips of storytelling. So I have that, a note on that. But for overall everybody, like I gotta congratulate you guys. I am just so amazed.
Well, thank you very much. Before I get to Ethel, I'll just say, yeah, everybody look up Lisa Nichols. I actually hired her. I did one of her courses. And I will be honest, she gave me the Me, We, You format. I just expanded it based on my other coach, Craig Valentine's story making formula. But thank you for mentioning her, Clinton. Now on to Ethel. Ethel, you had a question or a comment. I will unmute you. Oh, sorry.
Unmute. Okay. What I have seen is the profiles that you always give, 3 things or 5 things that you do. And as these speakers were speaking, I literally wrote down what the first me was, the second one, what happened to the daughter and him and Gilbert. Then I seen what the tomorrow was. So each one of those things I was able to, very not a unique person, but very literal. It was awesome to see the schedules that you have to do, like you said, the me, we, and you. And I really like that aspect, and I could actually listen and hear those challenges in each of those speeches. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ruth, I think you had your hand up. Did you or no? Okay, there's someone else that had their hand up for something.
Well, I'll give feedback though. I mean, each story was very authentic, and I'm very happy to be part of a forum where we can deliver those type of speeches, because sometimes with Toastmasters, we may stay away from that at times. So it's wonderful to actually hear more authentic stories, and it can be part of your book. So great job, everybody.
True, this is good seed content for book, right, Ashley? For books? Yeah. So yeah, I'll just give brief feedback on each of the speeches. First, Phyllis, you have a current topic, and I love to see that in a speech when you have something that we're all dealing with. So it became a universal topic right away. There is controversy to that topic. So I like the fact that you had 2 sides of it, because you said, oh, you didn't want to wear it, it's making your face itchy. You were afraid of what other people would think. So it's kudos to you for addressing the fact that maybe it's not something you want to do, but you know that other people have gone through some things that make them really hesitant to be out, and people have different levels. We have anxiety, we have people who've lost loved ones to COVID as well too. So you had that sensitivity there, which was good. You asked have you ever been afraid of what other people would think? I wonder if you could put say there's two approaches to it. So as opposed to coming back to it later, making people safe, address the fact that there's two ways to think of it right away, so that you tease the fact that you're going to talk about it after. I mean, my initial thought was, but then I sat back and I thought of maybe display some of that sensitivity. I thought of the people out there who maybe people that have issues with anxiety or whatever it is that's maybe close to you. I thought of the people who maybe have lost ones. I thought of this, and think of those things out loud so that the people in your audience that are sensitive, you get to that quicker so that you address that sensitivity in the room right away. Because I'll tell you, there are some people that as soon as they hear you say it's itchy on my face, they're angry. So you want to make sure that sensitivity is addressed before they even get a chance to get angry at you, and then they'll fall in love with you. And then by the time you get to the end and you're making humorous jokes about no food in the cupboard, everyone is with you. But other than that, I really like the fact that you did the me, you did the we, and you did the you, and end with that question strongly at the end, or end with your takeaway very strongly at the end. But it was really good. The me, we, and you was all there. So thank you for sharing that. Heidi, I was feverishly making notes as we went along here. Reach for the higher sparkle inside. That was the message, and that's the message of your book. Your me story was forgiving people that hurt you. You introduced your book before you talked about your pain. You might want to introduce your pain before you talk about the payoff, because if you just say, I want to share with you my book, people want to feel who you are before you share that. Is there a small snippet, because I know I only gave you 2 minutes, is there a small snippet of someone in your life that has hurt you in the past that you write about in the book that you don't mind talking about? Because I know your book gets really heavy, but is there something that you could talk about in a 2-minute span and take us back to that right away? When I was 6 years old, this is what happened, and I would not forgive him. And then you get to the we. Do you have that in life sometimes? Sometimes you don't want to forgive someone for anything. Well, in my book, I showed how to forgive that person, or I talk about when James did this, how I was able to forgive him, how I was able to reach inside and get that higher sparkle out. Can we define what higher sparkle means? Because higher sparkle could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So I know that's your tagline, but at the end of the day, what's the you message that's more specific than higher sparkle? Can we reach for that thing inside of you that's speaking, to screaming to come out? Whether it's forgiveness, whether it's patience, whatever that is for you, find that trait in your life, right? So that you're introducing your book without just saying, here's my book.
Okay.
So there's subtle ways to introduce your book, but talk about your pain first so people feel you, get to know you, and then your book is a natural sell. Does that make sense?
Yeah, my book is about all kinds of pain from everywhere. Ethel's read it, so she, it's not just one person. It's almost everyone that I met that had something to do with my life.
Okay.
So that's why I didn't pick one person, is because I had my mother, my stepfather, my dad, my stepmother, kids at school, neighbor boys, that's why I didn't choose one, because it was almost everybody that was in my life.
Okay. So you have lots to
teachers,
pull from there. And
it's all there.
The good thing about your book then, Heidi, as Ashley was saying, if you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. If you're speaking to high schools and you are talking to a teacher, you pull out the story about being bullied. If you're talking to a certain group, you pull out the story that's unique to that audience, and then you sell your book easily, right? Okay. So if you have a 2-minute, this is just something you can even use if you're trying to pitch yourself to speak to a certain area. Pick out the story where the people match the people you're going to speak to, and only talk about that. People know you wrote a whole book. There is more to it, but in a 2-minute span, you want to make sure you pick out what's going to affect the person the most, and they'll buy your book, and then they'll find out all the stories and they'll
Right.
be that much closer to you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for sharing. Thank you. Gilbert, longtime friend. By the way, just going back to timing, Phyllis, you were at the close to the 2-minute and 30-second mark. Heidi, you were 120, so you had a lot of room to actually start with a little bit of a story about yourself. And Gilbert, you were right around the 2-minute mark. All good times. And like I said, I'm challenging you to do something in a week, and I congratulate you all for doing it, because I just called on them literally last week and said, hey, listen, this is what you're doing next week, go for it. And they said yes. So thank you. Your me was your daughter. You talked about the story of you taking your daughter down to the lake. I love that you use dialogue for if you're writing speeches, instead of just saying my daughter said she wanted to see the goose, she said to me, Daddy Goose. So we got a feeling of who his daughter was immediately because he used dialogue as opposed to narration. The we was, you asked us all if we've ever had disappointment. Universal theme. Can't go wrong with that. And the you message is tomorrow will come. Now, when it comes to the we, I didn't say this last week, so I'm not putting this off. If you're going to expand this into a speech, when your daughter is disappointed, bring the question in at that point. You know that face when someone's really disappointed? Have you ever felt that? You know, so you can bring that question in there. I'm wondering if you can turn your you message into a phrase. You promised your daughter that she would see the goose tomorrow. In our own lives, when we have disappointment, is there a stronger phrase we could use to tie in there that we have to, something about patience or waiting as opposed to just tomorrow will come? So I'm wondering if there's something that we can use there. And I'm going to think about it as well, and I'll get back to you. I'll send you a text later. But you had all three, and that's all I asked for, so that's great. So thank you for that. All right, so I went through everybody, and Abbas didn't come back. So I'm going to open up the floor to anyone who has any comments on this process and any questions on the process, the me, we, you process.
I want to make a comment.
Mm-hmm.
I was so glad that I wasn't selected when I heard all the speakers, because I don't think I can match up to that. So I thought the quality was very good. And Phyllis started out, I'm like, okay, so Phyllis has been rehearsing for how long? Maybe like about a month. And then everybody, so the quality was really good. And I appreciate that. And I'm so glad I was not on the list for this week.
What? Why? Because you heard the quality, or because you didn't think you could make a story? You could prepare a story.
They were just so good.
They were good. But we can all do that. We pull stories from our life and we just bring the universal message out of that.
Yes.
Yes. Did anyone else have any questions?
Just to clarify, so the me, we, you, is the me is you start off with what you got out of the story, then you tie in someone else, and then you share what the audience would get out of it. I just want to understand the flow of the me, we, you.
No problem. The me is just your personal story. So just a personal, unique life experience that you've had. The we is how your story applies in a wider range, so into the world. So it's basically turning your personal story into a universal message. Donald Miller wrote a book called Creating a Story Brand, I think is the book. I think I might have it here. Where is it? Building a Story Brand. Donald Miller. And he talks about in that book, taking your personal story and making a universal message. So the we is a universal message that applies to everyone, and you is what you want us to take away from it, right? So we could take away a lot of things from the masks and the COVID issue, but Phyllis gave us what she wants us to take away from it. For this particular speech, I mean, I'm sure this whole pandemic can bring out a lot of different stories and you can have a lot of different messages from it, but that's the process. Does that make sense, Ruth? It does?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, raise your hand if you plan on being here next week. I'm doing one next week, by the way, guys. Okay, raise your hand if you, okay. And all right, Karine, I can see you. Will you be
I'm
here?
going to be here.
Okay.
I'm
All
here
right.
next week.
All right. So we're going to put Alice next week because she didn't get on this week. We're going to put Lydia, Karine, and Clinton. Are you guys up for it?
I'm on.
Yes, let's accept the challenge.
Yes. I didn't hear from Lydia yet.
10-4.
10-4. Yes. Police lingo. Love it. All right. So I'm going to write down Lydia, Karine, Clinton, and Avis. Okay. So all it is take your personal story, give us a universal message, and then our takeaway in 2 minutes. And as we do this more often, we will get better at it. I see Hitesh, you have your hand up. Do you have a question? Okay, he's not answering. He had his hand up. I don't know if it was from a while back or not. Okay.
Kwesi, question again. You made a comment to me in regards to asking a question on the we part of it. Is that where it is, on the we or on the you?
Asking a question, that's how your we can be transitioned into your you. So you're talking about your daughter, and you're taking your story and making it universal within the you. So basically,
that's for the transition of it.
Yeah, that's for the transition of it. And if you're doing a longer speech, that's how, I don't know if you ever heard someone speak and they just talk about themselves the whole time. Well, you break it up by asking questions to your audience, and that's how you get them into it. So they may be off into their own world, but when you ask a question, it brings them back. I always say it's like when my wife's talking to me sometimes, she'll say a bunch of things and then I'll miss something, and then she'll ask me a question about it and I'll be like, ooh, what? And she's like, you weren't even listening, were you? And I'm like, no, but that's how you get people back. It's how we do it in conversations, it's how we do it in speaking. Speaking is just an enlarged conversation, right? So if that makes sense to everybody, then we have our brave souls for next week. And I'm going to just answer this one question before we go off. Okay, so that's Heidi. All right, that's Heidi and Karine talking to each other. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to end the recording. I'm going to sign off. It's 4 p.m. Everybody.
Kwesi, I just want to confirm. So I'm speaking with Karine and Lydia.